This episode is powered by Hyatt, your smart companion for digital business solutions, and by Auditech's gracious invitations and support. Thank you for having me at the conference and fueling this journey. Let's go. Hello and welcome to another episode of Devs on Tape. Today, again from Grapevine, Texas. I'm very proud that I invited a guest today who talks about stuff I really don't know about, right? So I have to do it like a disclaimer because we are talking about EPM, besides other things. My guest today is Peter Nitschke. Did I pronounce that right?
That's very good.
So thank you for accepting my invitation. Please introduce yourself to our audience.
No worries. So, Peter Nitschke. I am the founder and director of Pivot2, based out of Australia. I go online as S-Base Down Under, which has been a name for a very, very long time. Originally, I've been in the EPM stack almost since kind of the early 2000s, working before it was even Oracle and all of those kind of frameworks. So, really started in planning and S-Base. I've got a business analytics kind of economics background, and then worked from there into consulting. For my sins, I've been a consultant most of my career. And then we started a company a couple of years ago, about 5 years ago, just before COVID. So we went fully remote very, very quickly. And yeah, we do EPM, kind of specializing in planning and budgeting, but also account reconciliation, financial consolidation, reporting, that whole suite of things that are there. My love's still probably always planning, but these days I kind of have to do some of the more accounting heavy things, which my audit people in the team occasionally explain things to me and wonder why my eyes glaze over, but that's all right. I live in Australia, in Melbourne, sunny Melbourne. That's very funny for the Australians, but live out in the country now. We did the COVID relocation that a lot of people in Australia did, particularly in Melbourne, because we were locked down for about 2 years. So we actually moved out up to 20 acres, up kind of northeast of the Melbourne in an area called Kangaroo Ground. And right now, the biggest challenge that we're facing there is we've had a bit of a drought for about 6 months, and we've got an infestation of wallabies that are coming and eating all the plants. And my wife, who works for Zoos Victoria, so it very much likes animals, is just trying to build bigger and bigger and bigger nets to try to stop them from eating everything. So I get dragged into a lot of that over the weekends.
I've kind of a deja vu because I was talking to Conor McDonald, or we were talking to Conor McDonald back in the days during the walk in Nuremberg, I guess. And he was talking about frogs the last time, right? So they said we had a problem with frogs. Is it kind of a thing of Australia to have problems with animals invading the country?
This is one of the things that everyone else in the rest of the world seems to have this really, I suppose, vision of what animal and wildlife is in Australia, and everyone just assumes that everything's there to eat you, and it's not. But I am doing this is a teaser for you. It'll come out after the session, but I'm doing a lightning talk on Thursday about a tier list of Australian animals, and I've had to put like warnings in there about the snakes and the spiders and everything else that are in there. So, but yeah, no, I think it's a funny experience, particularly living in the country, because I talk to the Americans or whatever on teleconferences. They're like, "Oh, do you see kangaroos?" I'm like, "Well, no, I live in a capital city. There's not. I mean, I see kangaroos, but I am not normal to the rest of the Australian population." And then we get a scene where there's a kangaroo bouncing over the Sydney Harbour Bridge and everyone just starts laughing at us again. So, swings around that.
I mean, Australia, I just recently realized that Australia is way bigger than people think, right? So you can even fly inside Australia from one point to another in still a couple of hours, right? So it's not an island. And even animals are not just like kangaroos everywhere. So this is maybe for someone outside, it's so far away, it's quite a thing.
Yeah, I lived in Germany went to university there for 6 months. And I remember I could walk from Germany to Belgium and I'd walk across the border because the supermarkets are open on Sunday and they weren't open on Sunday in Germany.
Yeah.
So if I ever needed food, I could just walk across the border. And that always just made me laugh because at the time I was living in Western Australia, and in Western Australia, you can drive for 10 hours and it will look exactly the same as when you started. It's it's very, very different. And I suppose I live in Melbourne, which is reasonably central, but the next capital city is a 10-hour drive away. And there's not a lot between those two places. My other director lives 3.5 hours away from where I live.
So you're meeting in the middle when you have like in-person meetings?
Pretty much, yeah. So like it's for our organization, as I said, we're kind of very remote. Started that during COVID, and then we've kind of kept that going. So we have to we have a kind of twice a year kind of catch up, and we've got to kind of pick somewhere to fly. And the last few times we've flown down to Melbourne, but we're saying next time we've got to fly somewhere that's sunny and warm and sit on a beach instead, because there's plenty of those options as well. And if you're flying everyone anyway, you might as well, go somewhere really lovely.
So in Germany, it's basically if you drive from the south to the north, it's not a big deal, right? So you can you could drive 10 hours, I guess, but it's in America, for example, it's just around the corner. I learned that it is 2 or 3 hours by car, right? So in Germany, we are planning vacations where we drive 5 hours at most, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, even just for KSCOPE, all of the people that are driving in from areas, Tennessee or West Virginia or somewhere. I'm like, oh, how far is that? And they're like, oh, it's about 14 hours. And you're like,
okay.
Yeah, I was complaining about my commute, but yeah, that's pretty serious.
So how long does it take to travel from Australia to Texas?
Well, so this is the most tragic thing about it. This is the first time I've actually been able to just fly direct. So I actually flew Melbourne to Dallas, and now I'm spoiled because normally I have to go through LA and deal with LAX and everything else, and it's 24 hours kind of end to end. But this was 17 hours. I got off the plane and just
How luxurious! And I'm complaining about 11 hours nonstop flight from Frankfurt, right? Yeah. All right, so you already teased a couple of words. I had question marks on my mind. So I invited you as someone who drives the communities, and various contributions were made in the EPM area. Tell me something like EPM in a nutshell.
All right.
What as an Apex guy, as an Oracle database guy, what should I know about EPM?
Okay, so EPM is a bit of a kind of a blanket term, kind of wrapped around enterprise performance management. I want to say that Oracle invented the word. They've certainly, put a lot of marketing dollars towards popularizing it and making it theirs. But the entire framework is trying to put apps to wrap around kind of financial processes that exist for an organization. And so within an organization, generally, you've got, your core business, which could be manufacturing, it could be, a services business, it could be whatever. And then you've got kind of the shared services framework that wrap around that. And so that will be things. EPM is mostly financial forecast, but not exclusively. And I'll touch on that in a moment. So EPM, insofar as how we see it, is kind of wrapping together kind of the forecasting of what you're doing, how much that's going to cost, how much revenue you're going to get. It's for, if you think about allocations, I might have a product and now I want to allocate all my overheads to it to find out how profitable that is in the market segment. I might want to take my longer term forecasts in there to try to work out which industries and areas I want to invest in. I've then got account reconciliation, which is incredibly detailed tech accounting, but really are the numbers in my system actually justifiable? And I suppose that's always funny, particularly you talk to database people, they're like, well, it's in the system. It is what it is. Yep. But there's I suppose, a business process wrapped around that. And so these tools kind of support that business process, support the words, support the text, support the commentary, support the approval frameworks that you may have.
So this is highly individual, right, for every customer, I guess. So I always think about SAP. So it might be comparable, right? So you have a core system, you have data in it, and you have multiple modules around that to rebuild business processes, right? So this is happening in my mind right now. So you have processes around data, and it's not only just physical data in a row. It is polished data and calculated data and business data around it.
And probably
Please say if it's completely wrong what I'm saying, so we're not going in the wrong direction.
You're not too far off, but it's probably also more the explainability and the analysis of what that data means.
Oh, okay.
So it is interesting to say, you think about things like consolidation. So that's I have all of these different companies and I'm trying to add all that data together and do all of the magical accounting to, offshore tax, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I want to do those. I want to do those processes, and then I come up with a consolidated reporting. That's a reasonably standardized and standardizable process for most organizations. There are some core accounting rules that you have to follow. There's some core structures that generally make sense. There's a little bit of, I suppose, syntax and everything else to it. Someone might want to see a report in a particular way, but it's not too. It's generally pretty structured. Account reconciliation's kind of along that same path, right? I need to make sure that my number in my cash account is the same as the number that's in the bank account, and all the things going in and out of those accounts are kind of aligned. And I don't have more money in my bank account than my ERP says that I have. So those processes are really more kind of building frameworks and structures and trying to do all the heavy lifting. There's a lot of stuff that Oracle in particular are throwing a lot of money at automating some of the nonsense heavy lifting, some of the heavy lifting that makes no sense, like saying that, oh, this transaction matches this transaction, but they've mistyped the name and they've called it IBM on this side and integrated business machines on this side, but that is the same thing.
Okay.
So a lot of that kind of stuff, which historically has just been humans sitting down and scrolling down a page and knowing what those things are things that can be replaced by analytics. I think for me, where everyone is their own special little snowflake, is how I frame it when I'm being a bit cynical, is probably planning and budgeting, where there are core things that you need to do. You need to get to a P&L, you need to get to a balance sheet, you need to get to a cash flow. But for your organization, there are always things that you're trying to do to separate yourself out from the competition. There might be different ways that you're trying to structure your bill of materials or structure how you're selling or structure, even just kind of core things of how you want, the demand to be kind of built up and done, that kind of mean that in the planning space, you build a framework and then you overlay all of the things that the company actually wants to do and how the users think about things.
Okay, so you should have a pretty good understanding of how a company works, right? So you said there are a few core structures that are mostly similar in different companies across the world, right? So or are you focusing on Australian companies or American companies or even European companies?
I think it's really interesting. I mean, even if we pick on something like workforce, like everyone has employees, right? There's very few companies in the world that exist without employees or for whom employees and workforce is not a core cost component. Great. They're all must therefore be forecast the same way. And then as you dive deeper into that, you've got a whole stack of different tax rates, vacancy kind of proponents, leave components, all of these different things that, US is very different to Germany, is very different to Australia. So I think that as you dive deeper into the detail, the differences become bigger. So a lot of what is important to do particularly as a consultant is kind of going, right, well, we could go all the way down to the individual layer. We could effectively replicate your payroll system into forecasts. But what value is that really giving you? The actual answer you want is, how much is it going to cost me to pay my staff? What is my current cohort? If I'm going to do all of these new things that I want to do over the next 12 months, how many more people am I going to need? Therefore, how much is that going to cost me? But I probably don't care about how much I may need to move between these specific, tax accounts and all of those things, as long as I've got kind of the overhead of, how much it's going to cost at an expense level and all of those kind of frameworks, it makes sense. So it's good to be challenged to try to simplify and standardize across the board. But it is always interesting. The more you know about something, the more you can see kind of the differences start to expose themselves out.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's always really telling, things like account reconciliation. I kind of said my auditors talk to me about that and they get very excited and they talk about the Excel files and how you've got to match all of these things up. And honestly, I'm just like, okay, that sounds fine. But it really is, as you understand the detail that sits behind it, you understand how some of those things can be done really quickly and easily and where some of the risks are going to come and all the differences and why those processes are important and how you can really ease the lives of the people that are otherwise doing, account reconciliation is a constant ongoing process. You don't get to finish it and then be like, cool, I'm done. You then do the next load and you keep going. It's almost a continuous process. So the automating that and making those processes easy and simplified and standardized actually adds a lot of value because someone can go on leave at month end, which sounds crazy to say out loud, but honestly, for some organizations, we've got such key person dependencies that can't leave on a quarter end because you're the only one that knows how to open that Excel file and run that VBA macro to bring all the data in and do the matching. So
so this sounds as a very wide topic, right? So we are talking about EPM, and it's basically, you already said that there are different kind of parts of the EPM community, right? So just for our listeners, we're sitting here at KSCOPE right now, and there's kind of a separation between, not a real separation, but you talk about APEX stuff, database stuff, and EPM. And EPM has so many different, like you said already, planning. You have analytics in it, or is it a separate part?
Analytics is kind of another bit again, but we'll get
another
to that.
bit again. Okay. So you have different separations inside EPM, and you have specialists for each and every case, right? So you are talking about your company you built up, Pivot 2, and you have specialists for everything, or do you have all-rounder that might do anything, and you just decide who's fitting to the customer XYZ for which project?
Within my team, everyone's pretty much a planning specialist first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
We've got probably the most experience in that. And then probably in the sub areas, it kind of either splits down to industry or, the additional products. So it might be a specialization in narrative reporting or a specialization in the higher education sector or the manufacturing sector. You mentioned earlier on, it seems like you need to understand a lot about the business, and fundamentally that's true. I mean, you walk into an organization, you kind of need to know very, very quickly what their actual outcomes are, what their levers are, how internally those things may be structured. As well, that makes it easy for us, right? Because, that problem looks similar to a problem that I solved 3 clients ago, so I can kind of use the experience from that and redo it. But the reality is, within an industry spec or within a specific application spec, as you get into the detail, having that domain expertise is incredibly valuable at probably being able to do the trickiest part, which is actually explaining to the customer and the client what it is that they're doing and where the value is and where the gaps are and what best practice looks like. It's quite easy. Well, it's quite easy, he says, about to go deliver a planning presentation on all the ways you can mess up a planning application, but it's quite easy to build the technical side. That has, and there's a lot of work that's been done, and it is just kind of a framework. A lot of those processes, and you know this from the Apex world, right? That now is so much easier to do. You don't have to do some of the work that you were doing a decade ago. Some of those technical processes that existed and the things that you needed to know to make it work really, really well, they've kind of solved a lot of those problems. But the fundamental of, I'm building a form, but a user has to use that and they have to understand what it looks like, and it's got to be consistent, and it's got to do what they think it's going to do every time. And as you add more complexity to that, you've really got to kind of bear it back to, well, what is actually the expectation of the experience that we're trying to do?
There are some similarities. So when I'm now imagine how you guys work. So you come to a customer, obviously there's so much work to understand what's happening there and try to adapt what you already know, and you see the problem, right? So you might see more problems than the customer themselves, but you're starting at the groundwork, right? So you and a structure on the data, on all those processes around that. Are you reaching the level of writing UI and UX parts? So are there any frameworks you already use? Is Oracle providing that? Or are you just deciding for front-end development? What are you doing there?
Well, so it's quite interesting because a couple of years ago, we pivoted, and we also have a drinking game where every time you use the word pivot, unironically, you've got a drink, which can make the board meetings hilarious. No, we pivoted to kind of focusing more on NetSuite EPM. So NetSuite, I don't know if you're aware, but NetSuite's let's say the younger cousin of kind of Oracle ERP. Cloud-based first and foremost, really targeted at probably smaller clients than Oracle ERP, and certainly probably smaller than SAP. Very flexible. It's got the App Store kind of framework where you can kind of bring in different features. If you don't like the way NetSuite does it, timesheeting, you can bring in another product and purchase from another vendor, and it's all embedded in there. So it's really, really flexible kind of set of ERP, and really targeted towards organizations that are kind of moving off the My First ERP, right? Like they were on Xero or QuickBooks or, MYOB or something, and they've grown from, a mum and pop kind of store, and now they're a $50 million organization, and they've still got 2 people in finance.
Okay.
So it's really that generative step of, okay, cool, I now need to go and get a new ERP. We love it though, because then we come in and talk about EPM and planning and reporting and forecasting. And a lot of the time, they're very, very keen on the idea of going, what we do now, we can't see a way of making this sustainable going forward, right? It works now because the CFO understands the spreadsheet, and on Friday night, they can do the cash flows and they can kind of make it work, but they also can't hand it off to anyone else.
Yeah, sure.
And they can't really extend it. And if the business keeps growing and 2, 3, 4x size year on year, this is not going to work and not going to scale. So they're really keen on the idea of us kind of coming in and saying, right, well, what are you doing now? Let's understand how you're structured and how you think about your business, but let's actually take that and put it on a platform that is simple and easy to use, with really the goal being, hey, we want to be able to do all of these things so much easier and faster. I think the key change that we're seeing, and this is, I don't think it's just an Australian thing, but it's certainly very dominant in Australia, is doing so much more with less, right? It's, we're coming in to put in EPM, to put in ARCs, to put in planning, to put in narrative reporting, not because, I've got this heavy 30 people finance team and I want to reduce headcount by 5 because I think I'm overdone. They're like, we've got 3 people. We want to grow by 5 times over the next 3 years and I want to keep 3 people.
Okay.
So it just means the scale of what you're trying to do, you kind of get that real opportunity to come in and actually affect good change management and do it. Whereas so often in the bigger kind of Oracle EPM ones, and this is not to say that you can't do a good Oracle EPM project, but a lot of the time, if you go into a bank or an insurance company and they've existed for 140 years and these spreadsheets, they started in Excel 94 and it's basically been versioned up since then. And it's, 300 tabs. And then you go, and there's actually another 20 spreadsheets that we haven't sent to you yet. And you go, oh, great. Okay, cool. And change management of that side is so hard to do that there are a lot of projects where you spend 12 months, you analyze the spreadsheet, and then at the end of it, you realize all you've really done is move their spreadsheet to the cloud.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
And it all feels the same and so on. You're really like, well, okay, have we actually massively added value because we couldn't fight the good change management fight?
You're not replicating. So you're not just having the positive points of spreadsheets, if they might one or some. You just get the negative things out there too, right? So
exactly. And
before what you said, it sounded like it's your favorite kind of project, right? So you're coming into a company which is like working good. It's going to grow like 5 times, as you said, or 3 times in the next 5 years. And you just help them to get rid of all the stuff that is coming financial wise. And you're building up everything. So to have a kind of a feeling for the scale, technical wise, you're building up an environment with Oracle, EPM, building some modules in it, like you said, time sheeting and so on. We're talking about servers, right? So you're buying servers, put them in the rack, or maybe they have some, you install the software on it, or you go to cloud, or what is it?
This is SaaS. This is the greatest thing in the world. I don't have to worry about any of that anymore.
Okay.
It is so turnkey. Look, obviously been doing this for long enough that, have done a lot of, done installs, did version 9 or planning 9 installs and everything else. And it was a nightmare. It was honestly just the least enjoyable part of the job because you would do an entire dev environment and it'd be 4 servers and a replication server, an Essbase server, and you'd spin them all up and it'd take 2 days. And if everything worked, then you had to do test and prod as well, right? And it was just like, this is really not that enjoyable.
It's not a copy. You do everything from scratch, right?
Exactly. That's kind of the old way of doing it. And then moving to cloud, now with it being 100% SaaS, and particularly with the kind of Oracle kind of sorting the provisioning process, the client signs the paperwork, they send it across, and we get an email, 2 days later going, here's your URL, log in, right? And it's done, and there's nothing. And for some of our clients, particularly for some, we still have kind of on-premises servers. If we need to do some integrations, they might have some files or a different kind of source system. We need to bring some data in, so we can use kind of install an agent and then kind of send data up and down from the cloud. But if it's connections into the ERP and we can use REST APIs to kind of call if they've got a payroll system or a CRM that we can just fire off a REST API query and bring the data in, we don't need to even have an on-premises server at all for anything.
Okay.
We don't even need to store data backups down anymore because it's all online on the cloud. So it is so much easier to manage.
How does the Americans feel by storing everything in the cloud? So in European countries, we have, like, especially in Germany, we have those, I don't think it's a special thing, but people are saying, no, I want to have my data at my place. Even this might be the most crucial part of a company, that they have their numbers, right? So they don't spread them around or send those secrets around. And you're telling me now that companies that are going to grow and they have all the different sensitive data are saying, oh, it's available via SaaS. We can just give it away in other hands, and it's working at Oracle's place and buy.
It is interesting. I think a couple of psychological studies done, kind of the how trusting different kind of communities and different kind of nation states are, and Australia is marked as very, very trusting, and of kind of systems and processes and the government and all of these things. There's a lot of reasons for it, mostly cultural, but because also IT costs and server costs and everything else were so high in Australia. And there's a number of reasons for that. And the big ones are really just that the hardware costs were astronomical, particularly you're importing out of the US. It was difficult to get hold of things. If something broke, you might be waiting 2 weeks to get it sent over. And if you're running a server, okay, great. So now I've got to replicate everything. Now I've got to have 2 data centers, and it's just that cost just starts to explode, and we don't have the population density to really support it. And all of a sudden, everyone was like, oh, okay, well, we'll use Telstra, which is one of our big kind of telecommunication providers. We'll use them to run our data centers for us. And once you've done that, taking that next step and going, or we'll just put it on the cloud, is very, very easy. And then that really accelerated during COVID. All of a sudden, particularly Melbourne, but even Sydney and Brisbane, fundamentally locked down. So you were not going into an office. So if you had a server farm in an office and it broke,
you have a problem, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was an unsolvable problem. So having the things on the cloud meant that all of a sudden everyone had access to it. And it didn't have to have a SharePoint site up where you're sharing Excel files around, but then, actually someone's downloaded it accidentally and taken it offline. And now you've got 2 versions of it. Yeah, everything being kind of active and always there. Even though, I mean, it's interesting, you kind of look, financial stat data, consolidated data, consolidated reporting is obviously core business data. It's like under the highest level of security. Think about planning data and forecast data. In many ways, it's even more problematic to have out there, right? Because, that data set is, the future of the company, not just the past.
Sure.
But yeah, Australia in particular really has lent into that. But it is interesting when we then talk to customers who are looking at other products, there is this little bit of nervousness where Oracle can just kind of come in and say, well, it's on an Oracle data center, it's on Oracle hardware, it's on, it's all there, it's all one stack. It's a very, very, very easy kind of process conversation and security conversation, technical conversation, where a third party comes in, even though it's fundamentally probably as secure, fundamentally all the same thing. They're like, oh, we're here. And then it's all stored on AWS. And they're like, oh, okay, hang on. So it's two different things. And well, it is how it all works, right? Like there's not, if it's set up correctly, there is no risk, right? Or certainly from my perspective, and I'm not an infrastructure guy, but from my perspective, I would prefer someone who is spending a lot of time and money and effort to do it properly, even though they are a bigger target. I think they're going to be able to do it better than any organization is going to be able to do themselves, really.
I think because of the size of Oracle, it is even a sign that you can, if you don't have any like data privacy issues or laws or something in this area, then you might trust Oracle with their stuff, right? So German customers, or even the law says that you have to, in certain parts of the country, there are like governments and so on, they are not allowed to store data outside of Germany, right? So they have to have it on premises at some point, not on their own premises, but they have to have it in data centers that are located inside European lands, because this can't be accessed by any other state, right?
We have similar laws that are, that work reasonably well because we're a big enough kind of organizer or a big enough kind of market that you can, if you want to have an AWS instance in Melbourne and one in Sydney, you can. You want to have a Google Cloud instance in Melbourne and Sydney, you can. You want to have an Oracle instance in Melbourne and Sydney, you can. So we're big enough in that as a market that you can kind of store it all locally. We're also that far away that if you're not storing it locally, you're at a massive performance hit.
Yeah, I would ask that next year.
Yeah. So anytime it's like if I log on to the demos that are in Amsterdam or the ones that are in Seattle or something, and it's that extra half a second every single time. And you would know from that UX framework, that extra half a second adds a lot to the performance experience.
Yeah.
So for us, a lot of the time, there are fundamental laws around, holding financial data in Australia. And there are a lot of things where, we haven't gone ahead with NSAW, right, which was NetSuite Analytics Warehouse. It took a long time for them to be able to, they had primary data centers, but they were also doing some replication across to the Singapore data center. For disaster recovery. And really until that was solved, there were some organizations, your government organizations in particular, or healthcare organizations who were just like, yep, call us when it's done. And then we'll come back and have this conversation because we're not even going to bother having that. It's too problematic for us to solve. So yeah, but I will say that Australia probably started a little slowly on the cloud side, but it really did explode because no one wanted to run their own hardware. It wasn't, there was not really a more complicated answer than that. It was just it was so expensive to run your own hardware for so long. Even though as a country, we actually have reasonably terrible internet access. And, there are some problems in that side. We still kind of love our cloud.
Wow. So when you're doing a session here at KSCOPE and talk about stuff, you mentioned the demos where you're working on. Do you switch the locations of the demos where you connect to when you're switching countries where you're talking?
We do a little bit, not so much. Like I've done live demos a couple of times. I've been cursed by the live demos a couple of times.
Okay.
So these days I'm normally doing more screenshots than anything else. But if I'm doing a live customer demo, and then they're in the US, I'll see if I can scam myself onto a US one and do that. What's interesting actually, we do a lot of work with New Zealand as well. Obviously, the much smaller cousin to us, and it is interesting. Obviously, they have national data security policies and everything else, but because they are smaller by such a scale, they also just kind of go, well, Australia's included. Right?
Okay.
A lot of the time, talking to them, they're like, well, as long as it's in New Zealand, Australia's probably fine as well, And it's quite interesting how, when you Germany, London, the big markets, you can just have these really strict, rigorous policies around it. And then as you go to the smaller countries, it is a little bit like, well, our preference would be that we were running a data center in Christchurch, but if you had to replicate it to Sydney, for data,
that's fine,
that we'll let that go. You got to be pragmatic about these things sometimes.
Yeah. All right. So I learned now that EPM suite or the different applications around that and frameworks are mostly used in SaaS right now. So they are in the cloud at Oracle's place. They are taking care of everything, and you try to get rid of all the hardware, right? So I'm always referring to USA right now or to the States, but we are talking about Australia, of course.
There are a lot of people here who are still very, very dedicated to the on-premise Hyperion. And there's a lot of good reasons to be. I mean, the flexibility that offered, even though there was a lot of kind of cost associated with having to run your own kind of components. And probably there was a little bit of cost of just the exposure to all of the flexibility that you did have. But there's a lot of people here who would argue very vehemently that they will give up their Airspace on-premise servers when you can pry it from their cold dead hands. But I think it's certainly from an Oracle perspective. I remember, and this is now showing my age of KSCOPE, coming to KSCOPE the first years and it was like, oh, we're releasing 11.124. And you're like, oh, that's amazing. And here's all the new features. Oh, great. And it's going to be released at the end of the quarter. Oh, fantastic. And then it's 15 months before you'll get either a new client or you'll be able to upgrade one of your own ones. And it's just the time to actually being able to use it was just so long because all of these new features were there, but no one would upgrade because it's quite expensive. There's risks. You've got to do all the testing.
Yeah.
It's not, it's a little bit, if it's not broken, don't fix it kind of thing.
Don't touch your running system, right?
Yeah.
So you don't need the new features as much as your running system, right? Yeah.
Whereas when they moved to cloud and the first few years of it, and now they've kind of solved all the low hanging fruit, right? Now they're just trying to, what's next? What else can we add to the stack? You're kind of looking at the revenue forecasting and the operational modeling and all of these things, which start to use like Apex as front ends for relational data. It's literally because they've solved all of the simple stuff. But in the first few years, it was just so refreshing to actually be able to find a bug, raise a bug, and have it fixed a couple of months later. Whereas before, you'd find the bug, raise an SR, get told it was a bug, and then you find a workaround because it was never going to be fixed in a reasonable time frame. It was just, or even if it was fixed in a reasonable time frame, you wouldn't be able to install that patch on it to solve it anyway. So
this is in many cases in the Oracle environment, it's exactly the same. So if you were talking about Apex and the database beyond it, it's always the same, right? So you have your customers. Some of them started to really move forward and upgrade databases on a regular basis, and Apex too. But I can remember the times where it was exactly what you are telling right now. So I don't think that I'm lying when I say I have now kind of a view and kind of a little bit basic knowledge to maybe understand some of the words that are on the agenda regarding EPM talks. But I want to go a little bit back to you as a person, right? So you are contributing so much. You already said you are contributing at KSCOPE. You're talking here for several years now, right? So you're coming I don't know, how many KSCOPes did you attend already?
I was asked this a couple of days ago or yesterday. So I think my first was 2013 or 2012, I think. I'm not quite sure. And I was actually got an invite on that first one to be on an Airspace panel, which was very exciting. And then from that year onwards, I was like, well, I've got to get invited back. And the best way to get invited back was to present. So I've literally presented every year since then, including the 2 years when it was shut down for COVID. I was getting up at 5 a.m. to do a presentation, which was absolutely hilarious for me at the time because, it was great, very well set up and everything else. That first 2020, the COVID year, and because all of the abstracts had been approved by that point. So they're like, oh, you talk about this. And I remember sitting there and it was 4:30 in the morning. It's the middle of winter for me. It's pitch black outside. And I'm there and I get this like brief introduction. They're like, oh, yep, cool. We'll start in 10 seconds. I'll do a quick introduction and then hand it to you. And I'm there, great. That's an hour presentation. I get 45 minutes into this. And I'm like, if my internet died 10 minutes into this this thing, I've just been talking to myself for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even know because I've got the full screen of just my slides open. So that was wild, those few years of just trying to do all of these like remote webinars and so on. But it did have a lot of opportunities because I remember a lot of the teams that I was working with kind of off and on, like some of the bigger infrastructure teams that have a big kind of Indian group that were there that probably haven't had the opportunities to come across to KSCOPE. The expense of sending a team out of India or Bangalore or anywhere is just astronomical. So for them, the ability just to get on the webinars and some of them you'd have 300, 400 people, which is more than I would have at KSCOPE. Attending a webinar on it was really, really quite amazing.
But it's never the same, right? So I talked to so many people, including the guests at F's on Tape, and asked them, how did you feel presenting in front of your own computer, right? So almost everyone said, yeah, I was sitting there on my normal chair on my table. I'm presenting like in front of, I don't think that there's anybody, right? So you're just talking to your screen, like in a meeting, you might be distracted by some things around you. And after your session, you're just still there and wait. And there's maybe one person taking over. It's a moderator, right? Or something. And you're just sitting there and waiting. All right. Thank you, guys. And then just close it, right?
And then go to your day, yeah.
All right. So if I imagine that I talked to 400, 500 people maybe.
But my internet may have died 10 minutes in,
exactly. Maybe I just talked to myself and it was pretty nice. And I mean, you just could say like, I pushed on record so it's not getting lost, right? But always the same, like you're locked off and it's not the same as when you are on the stage, like adrenaline in your blood and you're done with it. You're happy. You have a couple of questions. And instead of that, you're sitting there just guessing that there are people, there might be some chat messages, or you just see like 500 people leaving. And that's it.
I think the thing here, we always kind of joke about the hallway track of KSCOPE, right? Which is where you learn all of the actual, the dirty stuff, the stuff that's gone really, really wrong, that no one's going to put a presentation, no one's going to have an actual, slide deck saying, oh yeah, no, we did this and it was a catastrophe.
Yeah.
But the opportunity just to get, senior cons who otherwise, I don't know, I feel like I'm quite open and there's a handful of us that will, reach out on Slack or reach out on email if there's a particular problem that we've been beating our head against the desk for. Big advantage for me is that being on the other side of the world, I can often just like get to 9 o'clock at the night and just be like, this is ridiculous. Send an email to someone and I'll come back at 6 a.m. and they'll solve it for me. But that hallway track of just being able to have conversations with different partners who otherwise you may not get an opportunity to talk to. They may have their own internal training kind of processes set up, but it's not like, all the different partners and consultancy firms are really sharing too much information, on a day-to-day basis. And then we turn up here and we're all like, this was all the mistakes and everything else. So it's really, I love that for this. And that was certainly the bit that you never got online.
Yeah.
Like it was great, but did anyone actually really take it in? Were there any questions? Did I lose like half the crowd 20 minutes in because they didn't quite understand one of the key points?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
didn't have the opportunity
you cannot
to
watch
solve.
into any faces, right? So to see how they react to what you're doing. And even the other side is that it's completely natural that the people that are sitting in front of the desktop, they're doing the same as you would do. Like they're clicking around, they have maybe emails open and something, right?
But it's interesting. So I mentioned that we as a company are fully remote. And certainly one of the things that for us, and we've delivered a number of major projects fully remote, one or two where we've literally never even been able to have someone on site the entire time. And there are advantages to that you can share a lot more kind of deeper technical documentation, because you can screen share, you can kind of do a bit of a deeper dive into components, you can make sure that people are there and seeing things. But I think in particular with training, in particular with like those first requirement sessions, the dumb question theory, right? Like if you're not in the room, the chance of someone asking a dumb question, particularly if they've got to type it and everyone else is going to read it, they're just not going to do it, right? You don't know if you've lost someone in a training session because you don't have the opportunity to kind of look at them as that kind of, they kind of get that half panicked thing of
maybe my face I made when you first brought up some words here.
Exactly. You know, when they've done the login button and they haven't got to the same screen that I have, and they're just like, am I? So I think that side of even just, delivery as a consulting group is still key, because I think the hard part, as I said, it's not writing the code anymore. The code is, hard part's not writing the code. He says with 20 years experience in writing code. Once you've done it for 20 years, it's not that hard. But the functional side, is really something that is net new every time, right? Because the client, they're excited about it. They can see it. Show them SmartView. So SmartView's I'll give you the 2 second. Yeah. SmartView is an Excel add-in. And for a lot of people, they're kind of like, oh, there's an app. So there's something I log into or whatever, and it's all on a screen somewhere. And then you go, oh yeah, but like you can just open it in SmartView and it's just in Excel. And it's just Excel. And they're like, oh, so it's like, it looks like Excel. And I'm like, no, you're in Excel. You're just connecting to the database. And they're like, oh, so it's a copy. I'm like, no, it's literally, it's live. If you put the number in, you hit go and hit the thing, it's in there. It's all the same thing. And that kind of blows their minds the first time. For a lot of groups that have got these massive Excel files that every time they add a new account code, someone's got to kind of sit and find the spot to put it in and make sure that all the VLOOKUPs are right. And you're like, oh no, that'll just flow through. And then you can just hit refresh on your sheet and it's just going to appear. And you never have to worry that it's going to add up right, because of course it's going to add up right, because it has to add up right. So that can be this real awakening moment. And I certainly love that moment with clients, actually having them realize, oh, actually, this is going to save so much time because this is something that I just waste time on.
But at some point, it takes much time, right? So until this moment happens, it's not like rapid prototyping we're getting used to with Apex. Like we're showing them what's possible, and then they instantly see, okay, this might be even better than Excel, right? So we can do it better than that. I guess it's a way longer process on your end, right?
Yes and no. I mean, it's interesting. Come to my session immediately after this. The hard work is really setting up the structures. Like if you've got the structures set up, if the hierarchies and the dimensionality and the naming conventions are all things that they understand and that feel familiar to them, putting it into a form is then, oh, you just want to have a subtotal. Yeah, no worries. Oh, you want that bold. All right, great. Oh, you want a variance column. Yeah, cool. It's really rapid to do that.
Okay.
And even things that are complicated, like, oh, can I have a year-on-year percentage column? And you're like, sure. It's just a function and it works against everything. And it's dealing with the fact that, these are P&L accounts, these are balance sheet accounts, or I've got some workforce dollars, or I've got dollars per person showing up. It's all just going to work in there. Whereas if you're doing that in Excel, my year-on-year variance, I've now got to go, oh, if it's P&L, it's this. If it's a balance sheet, I need to take the closing balance. If it's this, so those kind of things really are amazing. But that being said, I have sat in a couple of Apex demos and gone, yeah, or I could just do it that way. That would actually be quite good as well. Right? And to be honest, I was in a scheduling kind of conflict, but there was an operational planning one for the new operational planning piece within the EPM stack. And as I understand it, I could be completely wrong on this. They're either using Apex for it, or they're going to expose it to Apex for the ability to kind of update and build operational forms where you can just like, oh, I will need to add a filter for this, or I need to add some custom colors to flag the things that are there. But it's actually now going to be on relational data instead of kind of S-based data. So that will be incredibly appealing, because all the work that you guys have just been ranting on about for the last decade and a half and building an entire conference wrapped around Apex.
More than one. Right?
Yeah. But that value is just so easily exposed when you're now looking at other data sets, which have not operational data, so detailed kind of SKU level data, has not naturally had a good home in EPM tools. And there's a couple of different reasons for that, but the high level reason is that's actuals, right? I don't want to plan per customer, per SKU sale, right? Like I don't know what my customers are going to look like in 6 months' time. So if I'm planning for them, I need to kind of aggregate it up and so on. So we're going to go, well, if you're going to do that, then aggregate it at the start. And maybe you can drill into the detail, but you don't really have the detail. But that kind of has meant that we haven't been able to do some of the nice things like, oh, can I filter by some attributes on these? And just, I still want to see it grouped, but now I want to see it grouped by this additional set of attributes because we don't have the low level data to build it out. So now having access to that, even if you're not using it for planning, but you can just expose it for users, you can make it available, it just kind of brings a lot more things into one single kind of pane of glass rather than it being, cool, I'm doing all my planning. Maybe I need to go to a different system to run a churn report or a customer report because I don't have that low level detail that's going to allow me to feed into my planning seeds. So yeah, some of those kind of components are really exciting.
So to be honest, right? At some point, our listeners will understand. I will rewind the whole episode a couple of times to get really everything you said. But I think it is really nice to see that at a conference like this, there are some common things we can talk about, right? So from all the different perspectives, I don't really know if I make it to your talk later on, but maybe you just share your stuff afterwards and we can talk then again. So I would like to do something that I do or we are doing with each and every guest in Devs on Tape. I will ask you questions that are not especially reaching out to the topics you talked about. They're basically about you, right? So I was one last question I want to add before we go to the categories, actually. You are contributing so much, right? So you entered the ACE program, if I'm right?
I was an Oracle ACE. I've got to go find Jen and apologize profusely. I was an Oracle ACE, and actually COVID kind of stymied me a little bit because I literally became an Oracle ACE in 2019. And then all of a sudden, a lot of the avenues to present or anything else kind of dried up. And it was like, well, and I hate paperwork. So I was like, well, I kind of felt like a little bit like, oh, I've just added a heap of paperwork to do like now lots of little things because I'm not doing the big things anymore that earn all the ACE points. So do I really want to do that? So I kind of like let it lapse and I feel a bit bad. So I'm an alumni now.
It was almost the same with me, right? So, but I was having my first child and I said, okay, this year will not happen anything. So I will gladly say, thank you very much, but I will not reach the points and I will be no exception. I will go into the alumni state. And yeah, basically right after I got alumni, points were frozen because of COVID, right? So, and everyone was staying at the same pace and waited to be over and restart again with conferences. Exactly the time I needed to take off for caring for my family, right? And yeah, so I was alumni, but you're still alumni and you
still alumni, but
you're gonna be back, right?
I'm feeling guilty enough that I should go back and start researching how to get back into it.
You should definitely do. So I think it's not that big of a thing to come back. It's just reaching the points, being nominated, I guess, and then you will be back again in the ACE program. I would love to see that. So we see each other way often, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah, coming to the categories. So we have 3 different kind of categories: hypothetically, in private, and consumption. And we will start with the first category, hypothetically. If you could undo one technological trend in the recent years, what would it be? And please do not use any terms I cannot say because I don't really can get proof of that if we should get rid of this.
Did you say undo? What?
Undo. Yeah.
Look, to be brutally honest, and I say this, I'm not a social media person.
Yeah.
But oh my God, if you could just remove some of that. Like it is just as a piece, it is just so addictive. Like I don't, as I said, I'm not on Facebook. I have Instagram, I think, but I had TikTok briefly and it was just so addictive. It was just so easy just to sit there and just flick through it. I'm like, this is awful. Yeah. I've done nothing for 25 minutes except sit here and flick through things. And like, what has this actually added to where I am? And in particular, it's like, it's so like appealing to the primal side of your brain rather than the actual intellectual side of your brain. You're not getting things on, philosophy and so on. Yeah. You're getting like, oh, look at this amazing football goal or this, amazing high school volleyball set from
basically
Arkansas.
Memes, right? Yeah.
And you're like, oh, great. That's great. And it's 30 seconds waste of time. But yeah, that for me is probably on the list. I mean, I don't know. I think it's probably would always come back is probably the worst thing to say about it. But if that had never happened, I think the world would be a better place.
I could just cut together the Devs on Tape episodes where exactly this answer was told. It was like somebody were really long thinking about what they want to get rid of or undo and if it would be possible. But really, at least 90% said exactly what you said. And even the introduction, how you said it, is always the same. So I'm going to put something like this together. Like,
you post it on a YouTube short or something, right? It'd be on TikTok.
Exactly. And that's exactly the reason why I'm always say sorry to everyone, because I'm introducing every guest here at the same way. Like, we're doing a video now for those shorts, Reels, shorts, TikTok stuff to get the people involved in the podcast. I know them. And then right after, like in the end of the podcast, they're saying, I hate those things. And I have to say, you will appear on that, on that platforms. But I still say, and it's something I already said in an episode today, this will not be split screen, but it's kind of a racing down there. So keep the people longer than 30 seconds in my reels. So, right. Awesome. So the people are really comparable right now. And if we get any superpower in the communities like EPM and database and Apex and so on, we definitely shut down those services because everyone has the same thinking. All right, let's move over to the next category. In private, are you satisfied with your work-life balance currently?
So I have possibly one of the greatest setups. We, as an organization, I've been a consultant forever. So, done a lot of long hours. There's probably not a lot of those really that I look back on now and I'm like, oh, that was terrible. That was a waste of time. I'm so annoyed that I didn't do it. Because I was also one of those people that would like wake up excited on Saturday morning because I go, oh, I had this thing that I was doing last week. And I'm like, I now want to write a blog post on it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I would enjoy that side of it. So I often did overwork when I was younger. So when we started the organization, when I started the company, we went, well, okay, we're not doing that. That's not the approach. So we do, as an organization, and a lot of this is driven by certainly some of the other directors that I have, but it's something that we're very much all bought in on. We do 40-hour weeks. Mm-hmm. We have an additional day off per month. Our aim as an organization is to get to 4-day weeks, which is quite difficult to do if you're also supporting customers. So we kind of want to work towards what that looks like. We have expectations that, if people are online at 6 o'clock, they're going to get told off for being online at 6 o'clock and told that it can wait until the next morning. Everyone is terrible. My entire team is terrible. I hope you're listening to this because at 6 o'clock when someone has a problem, someone will be like, oh, is anyone still online? And 4 people will jump on and go, yeah, no, I can help you sort it out really quickly. So we've got a really good culture around that. But certainly from our perspective, it's work is there because it's something you enjoy, because it adds value, because of these things. It is not what makes up your life. We've got a lot of people that are coming in part-time. So in particular, we've got a number of women in tech who have kind of left, in finance in particular, left to have children. And then they want to come back and they can't come back full-time. That's almost impossible. But even 3 days a week, 9 to 5 is really hard. So can I do 4 days a week, 10 to 3 kind of thing? So trying to support that in that space. And then I think as a kind of a company generally, we're also trying to move away from T&M as a output of delivery, so time and material, and really focus on, let's talk about the value proposition of the product. Let's work out how any efficiencies we can make on delivery we're doing. We want to shave all the time out of the technical side down to its absolute bare bones and spend the time with the client, talking to them, extending the functional side. We drive continuous improvement programs rather than trying to front load a heap of stuff and do it all in a project. You're going to burn out as a client if we load you up with this. Mm-hmm. So let's support you to actually do this journey over 12 months, because a lot of the time, I love my NetSuite clients. They're amazing, but a lot of them have done a NetSuite implementation and then either trying to do a planning implementation, an arts implementation, and a narrative implementation at the same time. And it's the same 3 people that are doing it. You're just like, you're going to burn out. You're not going to enjoy this. You're not going to get the value from it. Mm-hmm. And if any of you leave because of that, the entire project's off the table. So let's do this as a staged approach where we're really supporting you and working you through that so that, if clients are online at 10 o'clock at night because something's not working, then something has gone horrifically wrong in how we've done our implementation approach, how we've done our testing, how we've done our training.
So is it common in Australia that you aim for like 4 days work? So I was just reading some stuff during the last years, I guess, that a couple of countries or states maybe are aiming for that. So I was just guessing if it's an approach that is common in Australia, or if it's just your opinion and those of your directors.
There are some organizations that are kind of starting down the path. So doing a 9-day compressed fortnight. So still kind of doing like 38.5 hours a week, but like kind of doing it over 9 days instead of over 10 days. And then there are some organizations that are also probably driving, like smaller organizations that are trying to drive down to that 4-day week. But it's certainly not common. And certainly in the consulting space, it is not common. We still, I think it's better than it was, but I certainly do know of, some of the bigger consultancies and some of the bigger kind of, junior cons who are still, doing 50, 60-hour weeks as a common in Australia. And that's just, it's not the kind of organization we want, because it's just, it just, like, what's the point? Right?
Yeah,
like that's just so unenjoyable as an.
But it's very generous from you and your directors that you are having an eye on your people, right? I cannot imagine that there's a part of the economics that is leading to having more hours and more things done and being more into working more than IT is. But maybe it's just biased because I'm inside this economics part. But yeah, let's move on. So you're very satisfied with your work-life balance, and you try to get your people into the same position. All right, last question from the last category: consumption. How do you deal personally with the growing flood of information via various channels? So you already ranted about Reels and YouTube Shorts and so on. But if you talk about serious news informations and maybe social media stuff, but the better ones, how do you deal with it?
So I'll answer like the kind of the serious side of it and the unserious side of it. I think for me, obviously I do consume a fair bit of news. I'm quite a quick reader. So I kind of will sit down and read, a lot of articles in about, 20 minutes and then sigh and, close it all down. I think there are aspects of, I suppose, the bubble that you can get in on that do concern me. So I do occasionally, and it's hard to do, try to get outside my own bubble and read different points of view. And it is certainly a challenge to do that. No matter how you're consuming media, it's hard to do that, right? Even if you're just going and buying the newspaper, unless you're going to spend a lot of money and buy 4 of them, and then waste, a lot of time.
You're using one on the same always. Yeah,
exactly. And I think online now, a lot of it's kind of been guided down a path of, you've read this article, you might like this article kind of thing. So I think there's a lot of that's certainly challenging. I do try to, consume as much and keep an open mind as possible on these things. But it's certainly something that is quite difficult to do. And it's very easy to either get insular and, I don't want to have to think about that as a problem, so I'm not going to look at it. Or I'm just going to read about it from the lens and the bubble that I am sitting in, and therefore I have no perspective of the other side of particular conversations. That being said, one of the other sides, and I bitched and moaned earlier on about social media, but one of the things I used to play computer games, but it was all things like logistics planning, incredibly detailed, kind of games, and I just don't have the time for them anymore. So now I watch a lot of, I've got a couple of YouTube creators that play these long form games, and they do the things that I want to do. So I watch that at double speed, and it's kind of I get the enjoyment of having done the same thing, but I don't actually have to spend the 40 odd hours that it's done for there. So I'm kind of compressing my own entertainment down into a smaller, kind of more consumable bite-sized thing.
This is really quite funny to hear that. Not playing games anymore, except because it's no time, so you can just watch somebody else do it in a double of time. It's quite a thing.
Yeah, I had that reflection a couple of days. I mean, my wife hates it because I'll have it on at double speed, and obviously you got to focus a little bit if it's double speed or triple speed or whatever, but that's fine. But if anyone else has kind of got it on in the background, it sounds like chipmunks talking away. She's like, what are you watching?
I mean, there are people watching Twitch streams, and you can leave it on a second screen, and you can see it in real time.
It's got to be double speed, or I just lose attention. So I'm compressing my things down. Yeah.
So very nice answer. So I can live with that really good. So I'm going to close this session right now. I'm repeating that a couple of times this evening, so I see if I didn't get anything, or no, it was a wrong pronunciation. If I got everything right, and I have to research about that. Our listeners might hear it's getting quite loud in here.
I think it's drinks o'clock or something.
It is drinks o'clock. It's just the hall is filling up around us. So I'm very, very thankful that you attended my session here and brought me in the way or in the ecosystem of EPM a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm scratching the surface, but I'm very happy that I saw a different perspective and that you joined me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's been.
We'll see you later, and all the best for your presentation right after this session. I think you have 11 minutes left.
11 minutes, fantastic. I see my co-presenters out there kind of looking a little nervous, so I might go out and see you.
Then leave now. Have a great day and have a great conference.
No, thanks very much. Cheers.
Thank you. This episode is powered by Hyatt, your smart companion for digital business solutions, and by Auditag's gracious invitations and support. Thank you for having me at the conference and fueling this journey.